Today is April 15th, 2026. I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline. I've got the normal lineup today. Former Western Standard opinion editor Nigel Hannaford.
That'll be me.
Senior Alberta columnist Cory Morgan.
Good day.
And news editor Dave Naylor.
That's me.
Well, the courts, at the behest of a group of chiefs in Alberta, have blocked the Citizens Initiative petition for Alberta independence. I guess that means it's all over. Everyone just pack up and go home and pay your taxes to Ottawa. That's the end of it. Can Pierre Poilievre survive what seems to be an endless stream of floor crossers after losing the election? Mark Carney seeming to have some wind in his sails. For the first time, there's starting to be probably reasonable speculation about if Pierre Poilievre can stay in the leader's chair until the next election. But a lot of that comes from our first topic, which is Carney scheming his way to a majority government. Dave, it became official just the other day when there was a trifecta of by-elections. They were every single one of them was a Liberal seat. One of them was the slimmest of Liberal seats in the history of Canada, only by one vote, and that was ordered to be redone as a by-election. And Toblerone,
Turbone, I think.
Terrebonne.
Rusty Turbone.
I'm going with Toblerone. Still sounds French.
Swiss.
That's Swiss French. Swiss is not a language. Swiss is a geography.
So it's gooder if like a cafe.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So anyway, with the three by-elections, it became official, but it was very obvious with these by-elections he was going to get it. It's now official that we have a majority government here.
We do. Machiavelli would be proud of Carney's scheming in the last year. He didn't really get the majority, though, I don't think, Derek, from the by-elections. He got it from the floor crossings. Because, as you said, all three of the ridings were Liberal. They stayed Liberal. And in that Turbonne riding you were talking about, the Liberal vote gained. Here's the Tory vote stayed home, significantly lower than the recent election. But don't forget, it was the 5 floor crossings. Even if they had just won these 3 by-elections without the floor crossings, they would still have a minority government. So he engineered floor crossings. He sent out people to talk to Conservative MPs, identified which ones had no ethics, and pulled them across the floor. And there's rumors that there's more to come, and that he's still trying to get some more Tories to cross.
Nigel, I think that the timing of how Carney coordinated this, in so much as he can coordinate it, was very smart on his part. If they had the by-elections and then got the floor crossing, the headline would have been the floor crossings gave them the majority, which that's a pretty cynical thing to do. Mm-hmm. But they got 5 floor crossings, 4 Conservatives, 1 New Democrat, before the by-elections, and then they had 3 by-elections. They didn't pick up a single seat in the by-elections. They just reaffirmed them as Liberal, 2 slam dunk Liberal seats, 1 very thin one between the Liberals and the Bloc, but all 3 were Liberal. So the headline here was not. I fell into the trap a bit, Doc, with Dave. They played a nice trick here, where all the media were able to report, with these by-elections, they got a majority. But if the 3 Liberals had not resigned, or one been forced to have a by-election because it was too close, there wouldn't be a majority. So I think this was kind of brilliant engineering of the timing, in so much as we can assume these things were planned.
Yeah, well, nobody said Mr. Carney was a fool, and clearly this has worked out to make a good story. But I mean, just to say it again, Mr. Carney did not win a majority. He maneuvered a majority from, going to the least worthy elements in the opposition parties and making an offer that they thought was enticing. We'll see soon enough, I guess, what was promised to them, but. That was not a win. But look, you do what works when you're in politics, and he did what worked. So he now, however you But whether you approve of the way he engineered it or not, he has his majority. And the thing that we're anxious about now, what's he going to do with it? One thing that, as a naturally fearful person when it comes to politics, deeply cynical and anxious about what the crafty bastards are going to do next, you're probably going to. One thing that's not changed and won't change until there's a proroguement is the composition of the committees. And what has prevented from Mr. Carney from doing his worst in the past year is the fact that the opposition parties dominate the committees. He can't change that until he prorogues Parliament. Proroguement doesn't necessarily mean there'll be an election, but it does bring all the legislation that is in the pipeline to a halt, and it all has to be reintroduced. So there is a cost in legislative time if you choose to go that way. So, things could be worse.
Cory, with what I'm not sure what this. Every political party is a coalition of sorts. I'm not sure. Conservatives. You got red Tories. You got social conservatives. You have populists, Quebec nationalists. You got all these different. You got the big business crowd. You got all these different factions. I'm not sure what you call the liberals at this point. You've got Gladue, who is at least until a week or so ago, a right-wing, pro-life, social conservative. And you've got her sitting in the same caucus as Stephen Guilbeault and what's-her-nuts, who crossed the floor from the NDP, the MP from Nunavut. I can't recall her name. You've got extreme left-wingers, and I don't think the Conservatives actually have the extreme right-wingers, but or certainly not many. But someone who at least had a pretty solid conservative track record, even a social conservative, which is doesn't endear you with your own party's leadership in the Conservative Party. Now, I know when Gladue crossed the floor, she was asked about her pretty solid pro-life voting record. She says, "Oh, I've always been pro-choice." What are you talking about? As if her entire political career never existed. But how the hell does Carney hold something together that spans from Stephen Guilbeault to Marilyn Gladue?
Well,
because that's virtually the entire Canadian political spectrum.
This is the coalition of the weasels, the opportunists. He's brought them in clearly because he's offered them
something title coming there.
Something more than they were getting in opposition seats, which is a pretty healthy compensation as it sits. So he's got a bit of a juggling act, though, because it also shows their loyalty is questionable to their own principles, to their ideologies, and they won't hesitate to turn on him if it doesn't serve their purposes either. So he's going to be juggling the favors he offered, whatever they may be. And, they're not allowed to do that. We know there's been something been put forth one way or another. That's the nature of it. Hey, conservatives have done it too. But he's not going to have the easiest caucus to manage. That's why they proved me wrong. I figured he was going to go for a spring election to get a larger majority rather than having this piecemeal sort of thing that's shaky. But if he brings in, as we suspected, is starting to look a few more on top of that, gives himself a 5 or 6 seat buffer, he's got the majority he wants. But right now, I'd still say it's a fragile one. These are not strong people he's brought in principle. And the Guilbeaults, whatever Guilbeault might be, he's loyal to his ideology. He quit cabinet based on his own personal principles.
If he were to cross the floor, it would be for something that he's not really going to benefit from, like going to the Greens.
Yeah, and he might not put up much longer with a Gladue next to him in caucus. And there's a few other Liberals that way, or likewise with pulling in from some of the left.
Gladue has got to be better to sit by than Elizabeth May, though. Surely.
Yeah, well, one's crazy and one's just an opportunist, I guess. But he by hook or by crook, as Nigel said, it's the way the game goes. He played with the rules you got, and he got himself a majority. But it doesn't mean he's got necessarily a straightforward path ahead of him yet. He's got a heck of a lot more power and authority now than he did a week ago. But he's going to have to get a few more, I think.
The other thing he's going to have to look for is what's he going to do for the loyal Liberals who've been there all the time and now suddenly see the new boys.
Well, yeah, we're going to end up with a cabinet of 120 people or something.
Well, Nigel, perhaps I put it incorrectly to Cory talking about the ideological divide, because we have in the Trudeau era, and to an extent beginning in maybe with the Stéphane Dion era going back, considered the Liberals to be a more ideological party, and really ramped up under Justin Trudeau. But the Liberals have always fashioned themselves. They always called themselves the centrist party, even if they were the center-left party and happy to be pushed by the left-wing NDP. But they've always fashioned themselves the center party, and that wasn't even necessarily true. They were a brokerage party. It was the party of power, the actual governing party. You could have a kind of moderate conservative-ish guy like John Manley in, and you'd have Sheila Copps in. This isn't actually new to the Liberal Party. It just feels new because we haven't had it in a long time. This, I think, might be a return to the traditional Liberal brokerage party model, where they're the party of power. It's not the party necessarily of the left, even if that's the natural drift of it.
Well, Jeepers, Derek, I mean, I don't think you should be saying that out loud, because people are going to hear that, and it's going to be Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard out there in Calgary, says this is a much more moderate, middle of the road Liberal party.
That's the natural result of what happens.
Yeah.
It's just that's not the left-wing ideology is no longer the driving force the way it was under Justin Trudeau or Stéphane Dion. Power, for power's sake, is the driving force, and that'll sometimes lead them a bit to the left and sometimes lead them a bit to the right.
That sort of, I got to say, that remains to be seen. I mean, so far, just based on Mr. Carney's actions to this point, it would be very hard to say what sort of a party the Liberal Party was, because there hasn't really been a result that you can point and say, Mr. Carney did that. But the things that he has tried to do have been screwing Alberta. He's still wedded to the green ideology, which is revolutionary, in my view. And he's picked up a few weak-minded people to help him get there. So is that a party of power, or is that just a party of opportunism?
Gladue would agree. I mean, she said that for years in opposition, there were major infrastructure projects in her constituency. No one would even pick up the phone on the other end. And she says immediately upon becoming a Liberal, they came to her and said, "What can we do?" And she says, "This is great," as if it was a natural and good thing. In Quebec, you generally can say that out loud.
Same in London, by the way. That's they got a whole lot of investment.
Yeah.
And then she crossed the floor.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, in Quebec, it's not too uncommon in politics to say out loud, "Vote for us, we'll bring home the bacon." But in English Canada, we do it. We're not any really better in Quebec, but we at least are supposed to feel ashamed about it. We're not supposed to broadcast pork barrel politics to quite the same extent. She broadcasted it. She said the quiet part out loud. And so, that is something where you can say, hey, yeah, I might be conservative, but I could bring home the bacon now. And that is just pure raw power politics. Conservatives do it and liberals do it.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't only say it out loud, but the liberals are maybe more naked about doing it, transparent about doing it.
Well, it always were. So yeah, you maybe right there. That's I still see them as an ideological party, especially when you get off the economic development into the area that nobody else is really that interested in, which is controlling the internet, controlling what people can do on the internet, wanting to know what people want to do on the internet. The whole business with the C bills going through there right now, with redefining hate, C9, with the so-called Border Security Act, Bill C2, where they're looking for warrantless access to metadata held by companies that.
Remember, left-wing and right-wing governments do this, but they both, or I should say, left-wing and center-right government, populist right governments are less likely to.
Yeah,
but,
well, I mean,
these things are like George Bush's Patriot Act.
Well, it's an abomination, but Harper never did this stuff. Harper was there for nearly 10 years, and the issue was the issue was there if he wanted it, but he did not enter into looking at people's private information. This government will do that. Now, we forget about that because we're also focused on the economic development side of things, and maybe we should be. But I'm not prepared to just say, well, this is just a brokerage party and they get business done, and you won't know the difference. All that will happen is that you'll have more money in your pocket.
Well, no, I don't think that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, like, similar to, say, the Jean Chrétien government. The Jean Chrétien government, its natural pull of gravity was to the left. They are liberals at the end of the day, but they were more than anything. Where they had the luxury, they went left. But when push came to shove, they generally chose power, which is why once the deficit became a huge issue, they stole that from the Reform Party. They adopted it for themselves. They did something that moved to the right. I mean, Jean Chrétien, on paper, love him or hate him, mostly hate him, but he cut spending more than Stephen Harper ever did, more than Brian Mulroney ever did, more than Pierre Poilievre was promising to do. He did it. Jean Chrétien did it because that was the politically smart thing to do. And Canada was actually going bankrupt at the time. There was a lot of reasons.
I'm astonished to hear you say that, because what he actually did is he passed the damned expenses on down to the provincial governments.
I always disagree with that, because he cut transfers to the provinces that the federal government had no business participating in to begin with. It was not its jurisdiction.
But if you suck the provinces in and say, hey, you need to have this great Canada health plan, we'll pay you 50%.
But they had no business doing that money in the first place. So I'm a bit more.
Here's the difference between then and now. Then you had people like John Manley, who you mentioned, and you said they were the fellow from Saskatchewan, Goodale, Ralph Goodale. There were those kind of blue liberals in there, which you could actually move the party in that direction. I don't see that.
Well, now they have Vladu.
Well, excellent.
Okay. So all of this, good for the country, bad for the country, whatever you think. It's probably bad for Poilievre. Some have tried to argue, Nigel, that maybe it's good for Poilievre because this gives him 4 years now. He's not going to be on the razor's edge before an election. This probably gives him 4 years unless Carney pulls the plug earlier, to reset, rebuild, find the next more mature Poilievre. Sure. But it also means he's got a long time on the opposition benches now to wait before he gets to an election. And only one other leader in the history of the Conservative Party of Canada has ever been allowed to contest more than one election. That was Stephen Harper. And that was seen as a contextual victory. He had just merged the parties. The Liberals had this long majority government, brought them down to a minority, and it was seen as within striking distance. Poilievre is no longer seen as within striking distance. It was a contextual loss, in a sense, because they were expected to win this super majority government. Everybody and their dogs, including all four of us here, had bought into that. The Trudeau government was in ashes.
Well, it was.
It was. But politically, they've been revived.
Yes.
So now he's been leading floor crossers. 4 from his party, 1 from the NDP. Very possibly more could come. I think, predictions of his doom have been a bit premature. And still probably are premature. But I think now he's not on death. He's not on death row. But it's no longer a sure thing, I think, that he does make it to the next election.
Well, nothing's ever a sure thing, is it? I mean, your political career, you would probably be quick to agree with me on that. What I've observed in the last few days is it's just kind of the usual media pylon where everybody wants to be the first to see the end coming for the principal player in the plot, which is Pierre Poilievre in this case. Oh, he's done. He's finished. No, it's all over. They're looking. There will be more. Yeah, okay, fair enough. That's the media traditional looking for conflict. But let's look a second time. Who has he lost? He has lost 4 MPs who none of us could have named back in October of last year when the first one went absent without leave. I mean, these people are backbench non-entities. I doubt that they have a conservative bone in their body. They strike me as the sort of people who just...
Gladu,
well, she had one, but all of a sudden she doesn't. So
she got deboned.
But she was not like a Matt Generou, red Tory, pretty liberal-ish. She
sounded like the real thing. No, I mean, my heart bleeds. But
she wasn't cabinet material or a senior conservative.
None of these people were ever going to be cabinet material. And nobody who is cabinet material has actually they haven't left. They have shown no signs of disloyalty. So Scheer, Melissa Lansman, Tim Uppel, Rob Moore, those guys are all firmly in place. Peter MacKay, who would have been a blow to him if he came out and said, well, that's it for Pierre, has not said that. The staff are not quitting. That's another thing most people don't bother to even think about. But if you suddenly see chiefs of staff, communications...
But the communications director did just resign.
Well, he did, but not because of that.
No, although they rarely do say because of. We don't really know.
He's got a great job.
No, I'm talking Katie Merrifield.
Oh, Katie Merrifield. Oh, okay. I was speaking of Ben Whitfield.
Okay, so there's two big ones
Yep.
in comms who have gone.
But there's a lot of people.
Yeah.
So they're not in history. To me, it suggests that defeat does not determine the Conservative leader's fate. It's what kind of a defeat it is. What matters more is the scale of the loss, the unity of the caucus, and I don't see these things, at issue. And if you get another half a dozen defections, again, you've got to look and say, well, who are these people? And if when the news comes down that Joe Schmo is left, you're going to have to go to the internet and say, who was he anyway? And it turns out nobody is going to make a difference. It's not good, but it isn't. It isn't the disaster that the press are trying to.
When Mark Carney had his press conference, one of the reporters on probably CBC, but I don't know, said, "If you were Mr. Poilievre, would you quit?" I mean, what kind of question is that? Stupid. In your time in Ottawa, have you been to Stornoway?
Yeah.
Nice place.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 4 years living there. It's not too bad.
Well, if he would quit, because he pretty much has to quit. He wouldn't quit just I'm done with the job. I'm out here. He wouldn't quit for that reason. Yeah. Look, I'm not in the camp trying to crying.
Oh no, I didn't think.
But I think the questions are fair now. 4 is a lot. Cory, you'll remember Danielle Smith, when she was the Wild Rose leader, lost 2. Technically
it was
3.
the trickle that started leading.
Well, there was a Joe England thing. They were going to push him, but he jumped first.
Yeah.
So at least it was perceived as him leaving, but he was going to be pushed. And then Kerry Toll and Ian Donovan. So she had, on paper, lost 3, but more or less lost 2. That was a big wound to her leadership. And then she did, after that, make it through a leadership review where she won handedly. And a month after that, the Wild Rose was a heap of ruin.
Well, the interesting thing to look at with that was how well did grabbing all those floor crossers work for Prentice?
In the end, not very well, because he was too greedy.
It soured and if Carney doesn't play his cards carefully, he could eventually actually start. It's giving him a stronger caucus, but in public support, I mean, it might sour more Canadians. Some of them,
I know. Well, we talked about the last bit, but we're on Poilievre now. The floor crossers, you're generally going to lose the least principled people. And that is a reasonable thing for a leader to say, hey, that guy was liberal all along, or that guy, Gladue, she just wanted to bring home pork barrel spending. These are opportunists. They want cabinet spots. That's a very reasonable thing for the leader to say from who's kind of the jilted leader to say. But when the numbers start racking up like this, even your supporters in caucus are going to start to look around, even if they love you, like you're the guy, we want to back you. So your own supporters in caucus eventually start to look around and say, this thing's starting to fall apart. And
he's got his work cut out for him. It's as you said, he's not on death row yet. But
he's on watch now.
We're starting to work towards it. If he doesn't find a way to revitalize, show strength, show that there's a future, like this is a setback, but now we're moving forward again. Something does have to change, though, whatever it might be. And I think it eludes a lot of us, but there's a whole lot of, if we're conservative, we tend to like them, but people don't bloody like him. And I like him. There's aspects that can be improved and so on, but somehow he's got to endear himself to people. And I don't know how he can do it, to be honest. I'm not exactly a social butterfly myself. So
there's a lot of this is, I feel like he's almost a bystander. I'm not sure how much he can actually do about this, Dave. A lot of the people who have crossed have just been in opposition for a while now, expecting every time, hey, we're going to take down Trudeau. We're going to take down Trudeau. Last time it was, we're going to form possibly the biggest supermajority government in Canadian history. We have this in the bag. We're all measuring the drapes for 24 Sussex. And then on their face, Carney comes back and somehow the Liberals have this miracle revival.
Elbows up.
Yeah. And Trump was this X factor, this totally external factor, comes in and changes it. And in a sense, Carney now seems to have control of events. He can go to MPs, maybe are otherwise loyal conservatives, just say, you got to be tired of sitting over there. Just come over here. It's going to be the parties are better. You get to sit on the good side of the house. You're not in the cheap seats anymore. It feels like events, to some extent, are just no longer in Poilievre's hands, and he is a spectator.
We've got to keep in mind, though, that things aren't going great in this country at the moment. He can have his majority, but he's still got a huge problem with immigration. He's still got a huge problem with the economy going into the toilet, unemployment, and all these real world issues. I think will start to catch up to him. And as you mentioned, Derek, the Tories had a 25 point lead going into the last election, so they're trailing now. It seems by about 10 points. So I think the worst thing they could do is panic and try and remove Poilievre. He's just got to work harder and come across as more measured, more statesmanlike, like he did that speech in Europe and in London and Berlin, uh, and keep doing the things he's doing.
People are still with him. The fundraising was a record, $48 million in
Yeah.
2025. Like that's 8 months after the election. They're still pulling in the money. So, you know, we'll see what the first quarter results are. But at the moment, I think people are with him. Sure.
Yeah, but like, within it, remember, the caucus is a different beast than the members or even the voters. The caucus, these are people who are literally away from home, isolated, sitting in an apartment or a hotel, and they're living and breathing this stuff every day. And being in opposition sucks. Being in opposition for 3 or 4 terms really, really sucks.
Oh yeah.
And the leader of the opposition doesn't have, he's got a couple of sticks to discipline with, but he doesn't have that many carrots. The best he can offer is you can be the critic. So you get to make fun of the minister in question period, every week or so. That's not a big carrot. The prime minister has all the carrots here. The prime minister's job is more difficult in some senses, but it's a lot easier in other senses that he can reward, he can punish a lot easier than the leader of the opposition can. And they've lost their boogeyman in Justin Trudeau. Canadians, for whatever reason, have decided to give Mark Carney a lot of grace right now. And they're giving him this long extended honeymoon and chance, and he is at least not pissing them off the way that Justin Trudeau did. So they've lost their rallying cry every day of this buffoonish idiot on the other side. Now it's this quiet banker who at least comes across as an adult, even if he's still pretty far out there. They've lost that rallying cry. It's now everyone in the opposition benches. It's another 3.5 years of this. Do you really want to do this for 3.5 years? That's going to be hard to hold together. And I think if he loses a few more, I don't think he hangs on at that point.
Time will tell. It depends who he loses, doesn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean,
If Melissa Landsman takes a walk, what's going on? Something's gone wrong.
But he'll say, she's a Toronto Red Tory. That's what he'll say. So, and you can say that so many times, but when you lose too many, eventually that wears thin, and even your allies in caucus will say, it's been a slice, boss.
Whatever he would say, the fact is she stood beside him in question period for a couple of years now, and clearly she is an important part of the party apparatus and represents a constituency. If she deserted him, that would be a blow, no question about it. There are others of whom we could say the same thing for different reasons, but right now we're just dealing with.
But it's a lot of them. All right. Some Alberta chiefs were in court. They filed an injunction and were successful in blocking the continued collection of signatures for the Citizens Initiative petition for a referendum on Alberta independence. It's a weird thing to say people aren't allowed to go out and collect.
There are allowed. There's been a stay. It is weird, this whole thing. And a stay on the chief electoral officer starting the process of verification and moving further with it. So the judge said, you guys can carry on. Your deadlines remain the same. You can keep getting signatures, but the process beyond that is now in limbo. So if the deadline comes where they can't collect anymore, May 7th or whatever that is, or 2nd or something, they'll have all their boxes of signatures and petition forms and everything. Unless the courts have resolved this, they're going to sit on their boxes until they do, because the chief electoral officer isn't allowed to further move forward with the process after that point until two other bands get their chance to go in and explain why their needs are more important than allowing Albertans to have a referendum. But it's kind of a kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, it's certainly not dead.
Yeah, but it's kind of sucks. Well, I don't know if it sucks a little wind. I think it's kind of inspired actually the ones who are already active in this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't the judge say that they would rule on it before the end date anyways? So making it a bit of a nothing.
A couple or a few weeks.
Yeah. So in my opinion, it's a bit of a nothing burger because it's not. It's going to be dealt with quickly.
And still the big question though is then how's she going to rule? I mean, is she actually going to find that we aren't allowed to have a referendum on this, or at least through petition,
or at least so that raises the next question, Dave, which is, if the courts somehow decide that this is not allowed, does Smith then politically have to put the question on the ballot herself? She's already called 9 questions for an October referendum on a combination of constitutional reform and immigration issues. We've talked about that before. She has, it is the greatest political coalition maintaining I've seen from any leader ever, that she can keep a party together of people who are supporting independence and people who are still federalists. In Quebec, it's kind of the opposite. You have a federalist party and you have the nationalist party, and you have left wing and right wing within those parties. In Alberta, you have the left party, you have the right party, and the right party can have federalists and sovereignists in the same party. And doing that on such a fundamental question is the most incredible tightrope walk I've ever seen. One reason she's been able to do so, though, is because she's facilitated a process for the people to decide if they want to have this question themselves. It's not the government putting it forward. But if the courts quash this, and then she's presented with the option of, I think there'd probably be a revolt from the independent side if they're not allowed their question. But then she has to wear independence a fair bit more if she puts the question on herself.
Yeah, our reporter Will Vassar has been in the courtroom for the entire case. He thinks, and it's just a guess. Well, he says the judge is quite scornful of the arguments by the Chiefs, but you never know which way a judge is going to go. He could make the stay permanent, and then there's a huge problem. Cory's boys will revolt, but I think at that point Smith would see the wise thing and put it on the referendum ballot herself. Of course, I thought Smith would do the right thing with the gas tax, and that doesn't work. So,
okay, but then she would face a backlash because there's federalists in her party too. They're not all nationalists.
It depends on how you frame it. I mean, if I were, say, in Premier Smith's shoes, and you're in that corner now, you've got to get this on, but what's your rationale for doing it? And I mean, if you approach it and say, look, this has clearly got a large part of the province divided. We need resolution. We need the citizens to get the chance to get out there and get that vote. Thomas Lukasik has worked his butt off. Hundreds of thousands of people have demanded this vote, and it would be irresponsible not to allow that to go onto a referendum.
Thomas Lukasik's foot.
Well, because both sides, though, have demanded a referendum on this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, as you said, she's played a masterful job of riding this thing in the middle, and I think she could continue to do so. It's just as long as you're phrasing it that way, so it doesn't look like you're necessarily on one side or another. And there is truth to that. I believe if I was a hardcore federalist who really believed there's only 20 or 30% support, I would be sick of this, and I'd want to say, fine, let's do it. Let's get it out there. Let's vote. Get your 20%, and then you secessionists can shut the heck up for the next 10 or 20 years because we've gotten that out of our system. Because if there is not a referendum, this issue is far from dead.
It will be faster,
more divisive and problematic than ever for both sides. So I think she could pull it off if she just frames it the right way.
There's always the thing, you don't all we're asking for is the referendum.
Yes.
Nothing happens. All you're doing is saying yes or no. Nothing happens until.
And she's going to be called a separatist anyways. They're already doing that. It doesn't matter. Because
certainly Nancy is calling her a separatist.
And it's looking like a charm, isn't it? How those polls
yeah.
But that's part of it too. They've already shot those guns at her. It's not like they're going to stop calling her that if she doesn't move along with this.
Not strictly related to this, but certainly adjacent. New another poll out earlier this week showing late last week showing the UCP with a commanding 17-point lead. It would show a crushing UCP majority. Now, the polls on independents do have a majority on the Federalist side, and the worst polls for independents are mid-20s. The best are in the mid-30s. But it's the minority position. It's a big minority position. Politically, you generally want to be on the side that is in the majority position, and your side is united, not divided. The NDP is in the majority position, and NDP supporters are about 98-99% Federalists. UCP is in the minority position, but a majority of their own supporters are independent supporters. That's traditionally not a good place to be. This should be the NDP's time. They should be the Federalist Party. They should be dominating the polls, but they are getting their asses kicked, even though they're on the majority side of this winning issue, Nigel, and the UCP is triumphant. How sad are you if you are Nahi Denchi right now?
Very. I mean,
what explains this?
Well, I'd be asking. I'm not sure I can. I mean, I would be honest. If I were Mr. Nenshi, I would be saying, what am I doing wrong exactly here? I'm a pompous blowhard. Everybody understands that, but it didn't stop them electing me as mayor. I won the leadership fair and square. I mean, the premier maybe wait for the opportunity to do it. I've shown up at the media. Like, what am I doing wrong here? Well, back to the first thing. As an individual, he is not particularly credible. I said pompous blowhard. Maybe I was being a little unkind, but he's not good at putting his point of view across in a credible way. That's 100% of his problem.
Cory or Dave, this should be an issue made in heaven for them. This is emerging as the biggest issue. It's an existential issue. You have to take a position on it. This is not what should the marginal tax rate be, or how do we tweak the curriculum, or what should the royalties on the oil sands be, or something like that. This is a fundamental question that's going to have clear dividing lines. Denchi is on the side, the NDP is on the side of the majority, and they're completely united on it. The UCP is on the side of the minority, and they're completely divided on it. How do you not have the polls completely reversed? The UCP should be getting its ass handed to it right now.
Well, because Nenshi has taken the wrong side, though, on a number of 80-20 issues already, and that's part of what's dragging him down, too. He's defending keeping porn in schools,
not
transitioning children, and having men compete in women's sports. I mean, the NDP trans hang-up, which is a 20% issue, is a loud one, but most people are tired of that, and that's dragging him down. He's got a great opportunity to frame himself as Captain Canada and pulling the NDP, but he's acquired a whole bunch of other baggage that still people might say, again, I'll vote against independence in the next referendum, but there's no way I'm voting for that guy who wants to chemically castrate children. And
yeah, and there's many issues like that. The school book ban, even though we won't call it a ban, the women's sports, keeping them for women. As you've mentioned, Albertans are giving the UCP credit for those issues, and especially the economy, right? The UCP scores fairly high in the handling of the economy. We've just had a $1,500 tax cut, as the premier keeps informing us. So, yeah, it's if I was Ned Nenshi, I think he's in a worse shape than Pierre Poilievre in terms of career longevity.
The other thing, a lot of people just don't think it's ever going to happen, so it's not an issue for them.
Yeah.
I had, in Quebec, there's a significant number of people who will vote for the PQ, but they don't vote for independence, because even if they don't want independence, they like it that the PQ is there as the mean son of a bitch. They're going to stand up for Quebec. They're the home team. They don't trust the Quebec Liberal Party as a bunch of Federalist sellouts. So, you can vote for the party. It's like you're voting for the bad guy. You want him on your team. He's the tough one. So maybe there's some of that too.
And we're at a part where there's still, even the non-fully independence-minded people, there is a strong sentiment of anti-Ottawa going on right now. And
Mhm.
Nitschke doesn't present himself as a person who's going to stand up to Carney.
That's yeah. Well, the NDP is just Ottawa can do no wrong, and he said, well, they'll say, oh, of course Ottawa can do wrong, but then they can't like really name anything.
Yeah.
So it's very theoretical that Ottawa could do, could mess up for them. They're just not trusted to not sell out to Ottawa at
So
first.
that's keeping him.
Yeah, and don't forget they've got Avi Lewis hanging over their
Yeah, he's still
hanging over their
constitutionally
heads,
tied.
right?
They got umbilical cords
so-
connecting each other.
Yeah, that's gonna keep Nenshi's popularity down a bit.
Okay. Parting shots, Dave.
The most underreported story of the week: the 2026 Ugandan chimpanzee war. You guys heard of this?
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting story. This is a group of 200 chimpanzees who have lived together since for decades and decades. And a few years ago, they started to separate into two separate tribes, an eastern and a western. So, isn't that ironic? And now, for the last few years, they've been in unbridled war. As soon as they see each other, they're fighting and killing each other. Dozens of chimpanzees have died. A whole bunch of babies have died when their mothers have been involved in fighting. But even the monkeys can't get along. So what hope is there for us?
Maybe Epstein got into the chimpanzees.
Yeah. Anyways,
I
Google
blame the Eastern monkeys.
Google Ugandan chimp fight, and it's very interesting stuff.
That's not interesting. I'm just offering low-hanging fruit to Premier Smith. Here's an easy win that I think should be a no-brainer. The oil prices are through the roof. The government is getting a wash in revenue from it. Cut the gas taxes. You're losing the narrative on this. You've got the means. You're supposed to be conservatives. If you still believe when you're getting $700 million per dollar that the energy prices rise on the global market, you still have to ding us 10 cents a liter at the pump. This is one of the areas, too, where it's a good tax to cut. You would know from the Taxpayers Federation, it gives people more stimulus to do things, travel, spend, do other stuff. I'm not sure why Premier Smith's really dragging her feet on this one. Just cut that darn thing. And if you say you can't afford it, cut some spending then. I'd like to hear a conservative do that.
I wouldn't just say, because Carney cut the, so Carney goes out and he steals these kind of populist conservative ideas, took it from Poilievre. Guilbeault was upset enough when the consumer half of the carbon tax was axed. Now, at least the temporary elimination or cutting of the federal gas tax, I would have just loved to see the look on Stephen Guilbeault's face when taxes on fuel are lower than when he came to office, and it was done by liberals, at least on paper.
Yeah.
Nigel.
Well, that was going to be part of my parting shot, but at any rate, the other thing that caught my eye here today was the very, very negative, dark comment made to Frances Widdowson by a Indigenous woman who said that.
No, she's a chief.
Well,
she's not nobody.
a former chief, I believe.
Yeah, former chief.
But
of
anyway,
BC.
she was indeed a former chief, and she expressed that physical harm should come to Widdowson, so that Widdowson could understand what it was like to be raped and beaten. So there's actually such a much simpler way to get to put all of this to rest. You know what it is?
Shovels.
Because if there are corpses there that shouldn't be there, that settles the matter for me.
I'll bet you that doesn't happen in our lifetimes.
But that's the way it's going.
Well, probably not.
Well, the latest news in the Jessica Yaniv saga. I can't get enough of this dude. Jessica Yaniv, Mr. Yaniv, has filed legal action against the Western Senate on 4 counts of hurting his feelings for misgendering him and things like that with the BC Human Rights Commission Tribunal racket. I found out that I have to apologize to Mr. Yaniv for assuming this was all just white privilege on his part. Because it turns out Mr. Yaniv is actually Indigenous.
Oh.
He is a part of the MMIWGS2 LGBTQIA+ community. I just assumed this was white privilege on his part the whole time. White male privilege, but he is part of the alphabet.
Somewhere in there.
He is somewhere in the alphabet. Maybe, I think, all of it.
So has he paid his dues and actually joined?
I don't think they'd want him as the club. I would just love to be at like a band, like the band council office, and and this dude walks in a dress and says, "Sign me up."
Chief Jessica.
Chief. I was actually thinking that should be the new name, Chief Jessica.
Okay, so we know
Big
more
Chief
evidence is going to
Jessica.
be presented as we
Big
go.
Chief Jessica. Add another count to our charges
Yeah.
when this gets played again at our Human Rights Commission
I wanna-
hearing. Play this clip. Add another one for now slagging the MMIW GS2L GTB QQIA plus community.
I want to know who's taking over this show when Derek gets thrown in the slammer
Yeah.
by the BC
well,
Human Rights
That's you,
Tribunal.
actually.
Is it
Marty.
me?
Well, then-
He'll be my soulmate.
so keep donating to the legal funds, everybody.
Yeah. Thank all of you who have donated to our legal fund. Actually, we did raise some money for it, and also, a shout out to the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, who has stepped up to provide defense on the first stage of this. I got more to say, but we're out of time. All right, Cory, Dave, Nigel, thank you. Thank you, John and Josh on production. And all of you for joining us today and who are supporting the work we do. Remember, if you're not a member yet of the Western Standard, you're a cheap bastard and freeloading off of the work of everyone else who is a subscriber. So please don't be like that. Go to westernstandard.news right now. Click on subscribe. It's just $10 a month or $100 a year for unlimited access to all Western Standard content. And you'll be supporting the work that we do and maybe helping keep me out of human rights jail in BC. Thank you very much, and God bless.